Millionaire kicks out his pregnant wife for Mistress, unaware she's destined to become richer. The moment a luxury car screeched to a halt outside the lavish Carter mansion, it set in motion a dramatic tale that would shake high society to its core. Within those golden gates lived Alistair Carter, a self-made millionaire known for his fiercely competitive nature and his compassionate wife, Isabella, who was pregnant with their first child. Their marriage had long been the envy of the upper class, but behind closed doors, simmering tensions threatened to boil over. Little did Alistair realize that kicking his pregnant wife out of their home would trigger a spectacular rise, one that would soon eclipse his own success. Alistair Carter's empire was the stuff of dreams, built on an uncanny knack for sniffing out technology, startups that were destined for greatness. He'd launched his career in Silicon Valley, investing in small companies like Innoverse Solutions and Cloudmark Analytics. Some took off beyond expectations, and Alistair became the talk of the venture capital world. His vision, combined with a ruthless business style, turned him into one of New York's youngest multi-millionaires. By the time he was 35, Isabella Carter, née Romano, however, was the opposite of her high-powered husband. Gentle, supportive, and known for her philanthropic endeavors, she used the family's wealth to fund educational programs in underprivileged areas. Her frequent volunteer work in parliamentary schools garnered local media attention. On the outside, this couple seemed perfectly balanced, she the heart and he the engine. But behind the sheen of Alistair's impeccable suits and Isabella's radiant smile, there was tension. One late spring afternoon, Isabella felt the first signs of discomfort in her pregnancy, an unsteady flutter in her stomach that quickly turned into waves of nausea. She retreated to the lounge, a place filled with plush throw pillows and European artwork. It was then that Alistair walked in, eyes glued to his phone. He barely registered her pale expression. He was in the midst of orchestrating his next big tech acquisition, a deal that could put him over the billion-dollar mark. Head down, thumbs flying across the screen, he continued texting an associate named Peter Burton, one of Goldman Sachs' star advisors. "Alistair," Isabella said softly, "I'm not feeling great. Could we perhaps talk about scaling back my schedule for a bit? The doctor said the baby's due in 5 months, and—" He waved her off. "I can't talk right now, Izzy. I'm about to close something huge. Let's chat tomorrow, or call my assistant, Jessica Parker, to arrange an appointment." His words stung, but Isabella was used to Alistair's brusque manner. She excused his coldness as stress from work. After all, she'd fallen in love with his ambition back in college, when they both attended a Harvard entrepreneurship conference. He'd been so earnest then, so full of dreams rather than cynicism. But success had changed him, forging an unrelenting hunger for more. That night, Isabella found herself awake past midnight, watching Alistair chat with Peter Burton via Skype. Their words flew quickly: stocks, valuations, venture capital rounds. She caught fragments: potential synergy, massive scaling, no margin for error. The seriousness in Alistair's tone and the tension in his brow reminded her how important this was for him. She only wished he would remember how important she and the baby were as well. For Isabella, the baby represented the future of their family, someone she could nurture with unconditional love, untainted by the ruthless business mindset that governed Alistair. She wanted a loving home, free from the suffocating demands of the venture capital world. Her ideal was for their child to grow up knowing that wealth could be used for good, for bridging social gaps and empowering vulnerable communities. Alistair's vision, though, seemed to revolve around the next profitable deal and expanding the Carter name on Forbes lists. As the night drew on, Isabella closed her eyes, pressing a protective hand against her belly. She was exhausted, anxious, and unsure of what the future held. Little did she know, this moment of doubt was but the first ripple in a tsunami of drama about to crash over the Carter household. News of Alistair's impending billion-dollar deal spread through New York's financial circles like wildfire. The Carters' penthouse in Manhattan became a revolving door for potential investors, business partners, and bankers. On any given day, high-profile individuals walked through, from technology influencers to hedge fund managers like Michael Rodriguez, a notable figure from JP Morgan, eager to negotiate insider tips and secure future partnerships. During these meetings, Isabella tried to maintain composure, greeting each guest with polite smiles and offering refreshments. But her growing pregnancy fatigue and stress from hosting left her drained. Each time she passed by Alistair, whether it was to refill a coffee tray or show a new client to the lounge, she'd catch a cold, dismissive glance. "Alistair, do you think we can spend some time together, maybe this weekend? Take a break from all the meetings?" she asked. One late evening, her eyes brimming with need for normalcy. He shook his head, clearly uninterested. "Izzy, we're on the brink of a game-changing acquisition. I don't have time for weekend getaways. Everything is riding on this. You, of all people, should understand." An uncomfortable silence followed his words. Isabella bit her lip, recalling their past when Alistair could talk passionately about them traveling the world, discussing how they'd raised children who'd speak multiple languages and appreciate different cultures. Now, any mention of family time was met with frustration. One day, after Alistair rushed out to finalize some documents at the law firm of Calder and Madison, Isabella answered a call from her old friend, Caroline Johnson, a longtime confidant from their college days. Caroline had climbed the ranks in the fashion world and now worked as a creative director for a London-based label. Concerned about Isabella's well-being, she asked how things were going. "It's not easy, Caroline," Isabella admitted, her voice trembling. "He's different, more distant. He hardly looks at me, let alone talks to me. And this baby, I don't know if he even cares." Caroline's sigh was audible through the phone. "Honey, if you need anything, call me. I can fly back to New York in an instant. Don't let him neglect you or stress you out. It's not good for you or the baby." As Isabella hung up, she stared at the swirling patterns in the carpet, tears threatening. She felt trapped in a gilded cage, surrounded by all the luxury money could buy, but emotionally isolated. Despite the sorrow stirring in her heart, she tried to steel herself. She thought maybe once the deal was completed, Alistair would finally relax and turn his attention to their growing family. However, the cracks in their marriage only spread, like hairline fractures that would soon rupture under the weight of expectations. A sense of foreboding loomed over Isabella, warning her that she might soon face a difficult choice: continue enduring Alistair's neglect or take a stand for herself and her unborn child. Late one evening, the couple found themselves alone in the penthouse living room. Alistair was sipping a 30-year-old Macallan Scotch, his posture rigid as he stared through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the glowing Manhattan skyline. Isabella mustered her courage to approach him with a final plea for unity. "Alistair," she began, voice gentle, "I know work is important. I understand how much this next deal could mean for your legacy, but you also have a baby on the way. I need to see you care as much about this child as you do about your investments." He turned, eyes cold. "Why are you acting so needy right now? Everything I do it for us, for our future. But you're so fixated on having me at your beck and call. Do you not realize the scale of what I'm accomplishing?" His words felt like a slap to Isabella. She struggled to keep her composure. "I'm not asking you to abandon your deals, just to be present. Our child is a blessing, but lately you've been acting like it's an inconvenience." Alistair scoffed, swirling the scotch in his glass. You know what's inconvenient? Being held back at this crucial moment. We're on the edge of something monumental. You see these billionaires on Forbes lists Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Larry Page. You think they'd have achieved what they did by worrying about holding hands with their wives every day? Greatness demands sacrifice. At that moment, Isabella felt a surge of anger, something new and raw. She had always been patient and understanding, but his arrogance, his dismissal of her emotional needs, pushed her beyond her limit. She took a step closer to him, looking him square in the eye. You talk about greatness, but if you can't be great in your own home, loving your wife and child, what's the point? The tension in the room crackled like static electricity. Alistair slammed his glass onto a side table. You're ungrateful, he spat. Ungrateful for the life I've provided you. Isabella's heart pounded, her breath quickening. She laid a protective hand on her belly. I never asked for your fortune, Alistair. I fell in love with you before all this money. Remember? Back when you had dreams of making the world a better place. Don't bring up the past, he growled. I've evolved. You should too. Somewhere deep inside, a voice reminded Isabella that she had to fight for the well-being of her unborn child. I need you to go to the next doctor's appointment with me, she said, her tone resolute. Your child deserves a father who cares enough to be present. For a moment, something flickered in Alistair's eyes, remorse, or perhaps confusion, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Fine, he muttered, but don't expect me to waste too much time. I'll fit it into my schedule. Isabella left the room, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of a precipice. Little did she know, the confrontation that night was only the start of a downward spiral, culminating in a devastating turning point, one that would uproot her life and send her on a new, unexpected journey. The following week arrived with swirling rumors about Alistair finalizing his biggest deal, yet an acquisition rumored to be close to $300 million in venture capital. Financial news outlets like Bloomberg and Forbes speculated on the potential for Carter Enterprises to dominate a new wave of artificial intelligence startups. Whispers circulated that even the famed investor Warren Buffett had taken a private interest in Alistair's move. On the morning of Isabella's prenatal appointment, Alistair was supposed to clear his schedule. She'd reminded him twice, and his assistant, Jessica Parker, had confirmed his availability. Hope stirred in Isabella's chest, believing Alistair might finally demonstrate genuine concern for their growing family. She dressed carefully, choosing a loose-fitting but elegant dress, and sat waiting in the marble foyer. Minutes ticked by then an hour. Jessica's apologetic texts started flooding Isabella's phone. He's stuck in a conference call. I'm so sorry, Isabella. Another half hour passed with no word. Finally, tears burning her eyes, Isabella left alone for the doctor's office. She sat through the ultrasound, forced smiles for the friendly nurse, all while her heart felt like it was cracking under the weight of disappointment. The doctor showed her the baby's heartbeat, strong and steady on the monitor, a bright spot in an otherwise gloomy day. Despite her heartbreak, a surge of love for the tiny life within her gave her renewed determination. Leaving the office, she saw a voicemail notification on her phone from Caroline Johnson. Before she could listen, Alistair called, sounding rushed. Izzy, I'm sorry, something crucial came up. The West Coast investors demanded an emergency conference. I'll be home late tonight. No mention of the baby's appointment, no inquiry into how it went. Isabella clenched her jaw. She murmured a terse "I see," and hung up. Back at the penthouse that night, Alistair strolled in around 11 p.m., eyes sparkling with triumph. We did it, Izzy, he proclaimed. We secured the capital. We'll dominate the AI sector. This is the biggest day of my life. He paused only to notice her stern expression. What's with the long face? The biggest day of your life? Isabella echoed, her voice quivering with anger. Our baby had a very important appointment today. You promised you'd be there. He shrugged, stepping around her to pour himself a celebratory drink. I said I'd try, didn't I? Some things are just more pressing. She stormed toward him, grabbing the edge of the kitchen island for support as her anger trembled through her. Your child is not just a thing. If you can't show up for one appointment, how can I rely on you to show up when it's time to be a father? Alistair rolled his eyes and sank into a seat, swirling the liquid in his glass. Don't be dramatic. This deal cements my name among the elites. Do you think Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates let prenatal appointments hinder the birth of their empires? Don't you understand, Isabella? Once I'm at the top, you and the baby will have everything you could ever want. She stared at him, stunned at how deeply his self-aggrandizing fantasies ran. It was as though the Alistair she married no longer existed. All that remained was an ambitious, unfeeling man prioritizing power over family. In that moment, she wondered if staying in this marriage would hurt their child more than leaving. But she held her tongue. She retreated to the bedroom, shutting the door firmly, tears streaming down her face. Her hopes for a genuine, caring father to her baby were slipping away. Unbeknownst to her, that final snub at the doctor's office would soon become insignificant compared to the heartbreak Alistair was about to unleash. The aftermath of Alistair's triumphant deal echoed through the following days. Business meetings ballooned, phone calls never ceased, and the Carter penthouse turned into a rotating stage of global financiers. Alistair hardly slept, running on adrenaline and aspiration. Amid the chaos, Isabella found herself increasingly sidelined. She had always balanced her philanthropic interests with the demands of supporting Alistair, but now she felt more like an accessory than a partner. One evening, after hosting yet another investor dinner, she confronted him privately. Alistair, she began softly, I feel like I'm fading into the background here. You're building this massive enterprise, but at what cost? Our child, he cut her off with a dismissive hand gesture. Not this again. Must everything revolve around the baby? This new project is bigger than any single person, Isabella. It's about legacy. What about my legacy? She asked, voice trembling. I'm the mother of your child. Doesn't that matter to you? He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. Of course it does, but you're suffocating me with these constant demands. Could you not just be content? A heavy silence followed, charged with anger and sorrow. Finally, Isabella spoke, her voice resolute. I can't keep living like this. I'm giving you an ultimatum. Either we go to marriage counseling and commit to being parents together, or I leave. I'll figure things out on my own. Alistair stared at her, disbelief creeping over his features. You'd leave me, the father of your child? If you can't be present for this family, you might as well not be part of it, she replied, her voice cracking with raw honesty. For a moment, Alistair appeared wounded, but just as quickly, his eyes hardened into an icy glare. If it's an ultimatum you want, then here's mine, he said. You can do whatever you want, but don't expect me to grovel or change my plans. If you can't support my vision, I don't see the point in dragging this out. Stunned, Isabella stared as he turned on his heel and left the room. Her ultimatum had backfired, revealing just how little he was willing to compromise. That same night, she packed a small suitcase and texted Caroline Johnson in London, considering a temporary escape. She was unsure where else to go. However, before she could finalize her plans, events took a darker turn. The next afternoon, she returned from a routine checkup to find Alistair's lawyers at the penthouse. They handed her a set of documents, effectively demanding that she vacate the premises if she wasn't willing to support Alistair's ambitions without question. Isabella's world spun. She had anticipated a fight, but never did she imagine he would stoop so low as to throw his pregnant wife out. Tearfully, Isabella confronted her husband, who stood near the window with his arms crossed. "You can't be serious. You want me out." Just like that. His voice was steely. "You gave me an ultimatum. This is my answer. Leave if you're unhappy. Just don't expect a dime from me until after the baby is born. Even then, I'll handle child support, assuming you don't try to sabotage me in court." Heartbroken and furious, Isabella felt something shatter inside her. She realized the man she once adored had morphed into a stranger. Gathering her courage, she took a final glance around the penthouse, a place she had once called home. Then, cradling her unborn child in her arms, she walked out, tears streaming but head held high. Little did Alistair know, he had set in motion a chain of events that would one day leave him humiliated and overshadowed by Isabella's meteoric rise. Isabella found refuge in a modest hotel on the Lower East Side, far from the opulence of her former life. She had a suitcase of essentials and a dwindling bank balance in her personal account money. She'd saved from her small independent projects and inheritance from her late grandmother. A sense of betrayal weighed heavy on her heart, but so did a surprising sense of relief. Finally, she was free from Alistair's suffocating demands. But the reality of being alone and pregnant hit her like a tidal wave. She spent hours on the phone with Caroline Johnson, who was appalled at Alistair's callous behavior. "Let me fly over and help you," Caroline insisted. "You shouldn't be alone right now, Isabella." "It's okay," Isabella replied, though her voice wavered. "I need to figure out my next step." "I'm not helpless, Caroline. I have my wits, some savings, and I've always wanted to do more with my philanthropic dreams. Maybe now is my chance to stand on my own." Caroline made her promise to stay in touch daily, ensuring that Isabella never felt too isolated. That night, Isabella scoured the internet for rental listings, eventually settling on a tiny studio apartment in Queens. It was nowhere near the size or luxury she was used to, but it would be a space to call her own. With a determined spirit, she moved in the following week. The studio was cramped, featuring a worn wooden floor, a single window with a view of a brick wall, and a tiny kitchenette. To many, it might seem depressing after a penthouse, but to Isabella, it symbolized independence and a fresh start. She pinned up pictures of family and friends, taped ultrasound photos to the fridge, and began plotting how she would rebuild her life. The next challenge was finding a steady source of income. While she had relied on Alistair's fortune for major expenses, she'd also dabbled in small-scale philanthropic projects, organizing charity galas, forging partnerships with community organizations, and even coaching non-profits on fundraising. Realizing her accumulated experience, she decided to transform those skills into a consulting business aimed at helping non-profits thrive. The concept was simple, philanthropic consulting. With a phone call to Jessica Parker, Alistair's assistant, who had always treated her kindly, Isabella managed to recover digital copies of her philanthropic portfolio. Jessica, empathetic but remaining loyal to Alistair for job security, quietly obliged without letting her employer know. Armed with her track record, Isabella began reaching out to local charitable organizations, offering her expertise in fundraising and donor relations. At first, she faced plenty of rejections. Some non-profits were skeptical of her big dreams, calling her overly ambitious. Others questioned if her motives were purely philanthropic or if she was merely seeking a new vantage point for social climbing. Yet, slowly, one or two smaller organizations gave her a chance. Word spread that this former socialite genuinely cared about community development. Before long, Isabella landed a contract with an after-school arts program in Brooklyn, followed by a youth literacy initiative in the Bronx. Despite the growing success, life was not easy. She battled morning sickness, exhaustion, and the emotional toll of divorce looming over her. Late-night tears were frequent, and she sometimes woke up startled, dreaming about the lavish penthouse she'd left behind and the cold stare on Alistair's face. But each morning, she would remind herself that she was forging a new path, one that might eventually free her from the shadows of Alistair's wealth. Unbeknownst to Isabella, a powerful ally was about to step forward, bringing her philanthropic dreams into an entirely different stratosphere. Through a random connection, one of her new clients was a distant acquaintance of a certain philanthropic giant, a man known for championing global health, clean energy, and educational reform. He was about to become Isabella's passport to an unimaginable realm of influence and wealth. Isabella's reputation within the local non-profit circuit was growing steadily. She had a knack for bringing in donors, organizing compelling events, and crafting heartfelt appeals that resonated with the community. During a fundraiser for the Bronx Literacy Initiative, she mingled with guests in a modest church hall. The backdrop was simple hand-drawn posters by children thanking donors for new books, yet the atmosphere was charged with hope. As Isabella wrapped up her speech that night, praising the efforts of volunteer tutors and highlighting the children's improved reading levels, a tall, bespectacled man approached her. He carried himself with a quiet confidence that hinted at a lifetime of leadership. Extending his hand, he introduced himself in a soft voice. "My name is David Brown," he said. "I've been following this literacy program for a while. Your approach to community engagement is remarkable." Isabella smiled, her natural warmth shining through. "Thank you for attending. It's been a challenging but rewarding journey," David nodded. "I'm actually a representative for the Jacobs Family Foundation. We invest in educational and social initiatives worldwide. I'd love to talk about partnering with you to scale your model." Her eyes lit up with a blend of excitement and surprise. The Jacobs Family Foundation was a renowned philanthropic organization known for multi-million-dollar grants that bolstered NGOs around the globe. If they were interested in working with her, it could be a game changer. Over a cup of lukewarm coffee in the church's makeshift cafe area, David explained the foundation's mission, supporting programs that had potential for replicable success. He admitted that they'd been searching for a consultant who understood both grassroots operations and high-level fundraising tactics. "I've reviewed some of your proposals," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "What's unique is how you tailor each plan to the community's needs rather than imposing a one-size-fits-all solution. We believe that approach can be scaled across multiple locations nationally and perhaps even internationally." Isabella's mind raced. She felt the flutter of excitement in her chest. If she landed this partnership, she could expand her business, secure a stable income, and, most importantly, make a real impact in communities beyond New York. It was an opportunity that seemed almost unreal, especially given how recently her life had been turned upside down. She hesitated only for a moment, concern creeping into her voice. "You do know about my background, right? My husband, ex-husband, really Alistair Carter, is a high-profile investor. There's a lot of media attention around him. I don't want to bring negative publicity to any foundation." David waved away her worries. "We're aware of the situation, but frankly, it has no bearing on your expertise or integrity. We're here to support the best philanthropic consultants. And from what we've seen, that's you." A wave of gratitude washed over Isabella. For the first time since Alistair had kicked her out, she felt validated in a way that wasn't tied to her marriage or her estranged husband's fortune. She reached across the table and shook David's hand. "I'm honored," she said, smiling through eyes that threatened tears. "Let's see what we can build together." As they discussed preliminary steps and potential contract terms, Isabella's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, an unknown number. Strange, she declined the call, returning her attention to David. Little did she know that missed call was from Alistair's lawyer, and it bore news that would soon stir the embers of conflict once more. Meanwhile, across town in his grand penthouse, Alistair Carter paced the marble floors with an uncharacteristic frown. His empire, which had seemed invincible only weeks ago, was showing signs of strain. The high-profile AI acquisition hadn't progressed as smoothly as planned. An unforeseen lawsuit over patent rights had emerged, threatening to stall the entire deal. Investors like Michael Rodriguez of JP Morgan grew cautious, demanding more due diligence before releasing additional capital. To make matters worse, internal conflicts arose at Carter Enterprises. Peter Burton, Alistair's financial advisor from Goldman Sachs, expressed concerns about the ballooning budget. The tech startup they acquired required more R&D funding than initially projected, and the revenue timeline looked longer than promised in the pitch deck. Tension flared in the boardroom as blame circled, each executive pointing fingers at the others. Despite these complications, Alistair stubbornly pushed ahead, insisting that the AI acquisition was the future and brushing aside cautionary advice. The cost of his grand vision was mounting, both financially and emotionally. He barely slept, living on coffee, energy drinks, and fleeting moments of rest on a leather couch in his office. His temper, already short, became explosive. Staff members treaded carefully, fearful of his unpredictable moods. Jessica Parker, his loyal assistant, worried for him. She had never seen him this frantic. Their old routine was gone, replaced by a frenetic schedule where lunch breaks were non-existent. When she discreetly mentioned Isabella's new philanthropic consulting firm, having spotted a social media post praising Isabella's recent success, Alistair waved it off with a sneer. "Please, Jessica," he scoffed. "She's probably organizing bake sales and rummage events for charity. Let her have her little projects. It's nothing compared to what we're doing here." Yet, beneath his dismissive exterior, a gnawing sense of regret began to bloom within Alistair. At night, when the city's lights flickered against the windows, he'd sometimes find himself remembering simpler times, how Isabella once supported him without question, encouraging him to dream big. He even recalled the joy he felt upon learning she was pregnant, and then, as if shutting a door, he buried those memories under layers of pride. Admitting fault or seeking reconciliation felt like weakness. In his mind, success and power had to be preserved at all costs. But deep cracks were forming in the facade. A devastating blow arrived when the lawsuit threatened to pull Carter Enterprises into a lengthy and costly legal battle. If lost, it could strip Alistair of the right to use critical AI technology that formed the backbone of his new acquisition. The potential losses were astronomical, and suddenly the board demanded a new strategy or possibly Alistair's resignation. Enraged at the suggestion he stepped down, Alistair doubled down on legal defenses, pouring obscene amounts of money into top law firms. He was convinced that, with enough resources, he could crush any opposition. However, the market sensed the instability, and Carter Enterprises' stock began to dip. Bloomberg published a piece questioning whether Alistair Carter had overreached. Headlines read, "Ambition or Folly?" Inside Carter's risky AI gamble. As tensions mounted, Alistair sought an escape, a scapegoat, someone to blame. He no longer had Isabella to vent to, nor the emotional support she once provided. Realizing she was entirely out of reach, a flicker of longing tugged at him, quickly replaced by anger. In a desperate bid to gain control of the public narrative, Alistair's lawyers tried to contact Isabella, hoping to head off any potential public relations fallout involving their broken marriage. But she never answered. She was busy building her own empire, one that was quickly taking shape, unbeknownst to Alistair. Isabella's partnership with the Jacobs Family Foundation opened doors she never thought possible. Through David Brown's introductions, she connected with other philanthropic heavyweights, including the Gates Foundation's program officers and the Global Education Fund's directors. Isabella's phone rang constantly, emails flooded her inbox. Everyone wanted to hear about her unique approach to community-centric philanthropy. She worked tirelessly, though she balanced her schedule with prenatal care. Each day seemed a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. In less than 2 months, she secured contracts to develop strategies for literacy programs in Chicago, community health clinics in Detroit, and after-school tech clubs in San Francisco. Through these endeavors, her modest consulting firm transformed into a multi-city operation. To manage the growth, she expanded her team. Isabella hired 3 project managers, each an expert in non-profit development, and a small but dedicated administrative staff. They worked out of a shared workspace in Midtown Manhattan, a buzzing hub of startups and social enterprises. Whenever doubt crept in, she remembered the lonely nights in the penthouse, overshadowed by Alistair's dreams. Here she was forging her path, proving her capability on her own terms. One sunny afternoon, David Brown invited her to a high-profile philanthropy conference in Washington, D.C. It was a gathering of global leaders in education, health, and social justice. Isabella was invited to speak on a panel about sustainable community projects. Nervous but determined, she made the trip, her belly now noticeably round in her 6th month of pregnancy. At the conference, she spoke passionately about the need to respect local cultures and empower community leaders. Her authenticity captivated the audience. Philanthropists and NGO directors alike lined up afterward, eager to learn more. By the day's end, Isabella had multiple invitations to partner on international projects, from building women's shelters in India to establishing microfinance hubs in parts of Africa. Amid this whirlwind of success, Isabella took a quiet moment in her hotel room, pressing a hand gently against her belly. She whispered to her unborn child, "Everything I'm doing is for you, little one. I promise to give you a life filled with love and purpose." She smiled, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes, feeling the baby's soft kicks as if affirming her vow. Meanwhile, back in New York, the media began catching wind of her ascent. Business Insider released a feature titled "From Socialite to Powerhouse Philanthropist, the Isabella Carter Story." They detailed her consultancy's rapid rise and her rumored multi-million-dollar partnership with the Jacobs Family Foundation. Old photos of her and Alistair circulated, prompting headlines speculating about the contrast between his struggling AI venture and her blossoming philanthropic empire. But Isabella stayed focused. She refused to engage in any public mudslinging, even as reporters questioned how she felt about Alistair's legal troubles. Whenever asked, she maintained a composed demeanor. "I wish him well," she would say, leaving it at that. Shortly after returning from Washington, David Brown organized a formal signing event for a multi-million-dollar contract with Isabella's firm. The ceremony took place in a posh Midtown lounge, complete with press coverage. Flashes from cameras dazzled the room as she penned her name, effectively locking in a deal valued at nearly $30 million over 5 years, enough to grow her consulting practice into a global force. Each pen stroke felt surreal. She remembered the humiliating day she left the penthouse, the weight of Alistair's betrayal heavy on her shoulders. Now, here she was, forging a new legacy for her soon-to-be-born child. When she finally put the pen down, applause erupted, echoing the triumph in her heart. She was no longer just Alistair Carter's wife. She was Isabella Carter, an influential philanthropist, a future mother, and a woman who had learned to rise from the ashes of heartbreak. And unbeknownst to her, Alistair was about to witness the magnitude of her success in a most public way setting. The stage for the moment, their paths would collide once again. Alistair was in the middle of a tense board meeting when Peter Burton interrupted with urgent news. "There's something you need to see," he said, thrusting a tablet toward him. On the screen was a live stream from a major financial news outlet covering the signing event for Isabella's new contract. The headline read, "Philanthropic Rising Star Secures Mega Deal with Jacobs Family Foundation." A reporter described how Isabella Carter, soon to be a mother, had taken the non-profit world by storm with her innovative strategies. Alistair's eyes narrowed. He couldn't look away from the footage of his pregnant ex-wife, glowing with confidence as she shook hands with David Brown. A swirl of conflicting emotions crashed within him: anger, envy, regret. He could hardly believe that the woman he once dismissed had achieved this level of success independently. His board members also caught sight of the footage. An awkward hush fell over the room. While no one dared comment directly, Alistair sensed their silent judgment. His wife is out there forging million-dollar deals, while Carter Enterprises is tangled in legal battles and declining valuations. In a rare moment of humility, Alistair felt an uncomfortable pang in his chest, as though a small voice whispered, "What have you done?" But he quickly buried it. Instead, he snapped at Peter Burton, "So what? Good for her. Let's get back to business." Yet, the business was far from stable. Lawsuits dragged on, daily operations faltered, and investor confidence eroded with each passing week. Magazine covers that once hailed Alistair as the next big thing now questioned whether Carter Enterprises could survive. Whenever reporters asked him about Isabella's success, Alistair would force a tight smile, refusing to comment. In private, though, he found himself obsessively reading every article about her philanthropic achievements. Late nights in his office, half-empty coffee cups scattered around, he scrolled through social media posts praising her dedication, saw pictures of her cradling her growing belly at events. The more he observed her ascend, the more unsettled he became. Could I have built an empire with her if I'd been patient? He sometimes wondered, only to dismiss the thought as weakness. One evening, Alistair's phone rang. It was Caroline Johnson, the longtime friend of Isabella's, calling from London. He rarely heard from her, and the sound of her voice startled him. "Alistair," Caroline said curtly, "I don't know what game you're playing, but don't even think about disrupting Isabella's life, now that she's finally at peace. If your lawyers harass her again, I'll make sure every media outlet knows just how low you've sunk." He clenched his jaw. "I have no intention of harassing her, Caroline, but she's carrying my child, and I have rights too. You forfeited those rights when you kicked her out. She doesn't need your pity or your money or your name," Caroline snapped, her voice dripping with contempt. "Stay away!" The line went dead, leaving Alistair stewing in silence. He resented how everyone now viewed him as the villain, and, in truth, he couldn't entirely blame them. But stubborn pride kept him from admitting fault. Instead, he resolved to salvage his business and restore his reputation. Maybe then, he reasoned, he could approach Isabella from a place of strength. What Alistair didn't realize was that time was running short. Isabella's due date was drawing near, and fate had a twist, waiting for both of them, one that would force him to confront everything he had done. The day Isabella went into labor, she was finalizing a strategy proposal for a major international NGO. Typically organized, she had arranged a birthing plan with a reputable midtown hospital, selecting a medical team recommended by her philanthropic contacts. Caroline Johnson had flown in from London, determined to support her friend. They had turned Isabella's modest Queen studio into a cozy nest, complete with a crib, baby clothes, and an inspiring collage of philanthropic success stories taped on the walls. When Isabella's contractions started, Caroline calmly called the hospital. They arrived just in time, the nurse ushering Isabella into a private delivery suite. Although the pains were intense, Isabella felt a calm resolve. She had faced so many challenges alone, and now she was bringing a new life into the world, someone who represented hope and unconditional love. After several hours, baby Lily Carter was born, weighing just over 6 pounds, with a tuft of dark hair and bright, curious eyes. Isabella wept tears of relief and joy the moment she heard her daughter's first cry. Caroline stood by her side, tears shining in her own eyes as she captured the moment in photos. In the flurry of nurses and doctors congratulating her, Isabella felt a peace unlike any she had known. "I did this on my own terms," she thought, pressing a gentle kiss to Lily's forehead. News of Lily's birth spread within Isabella's close circle. David Brown sent flowers and balloons, while staff from her consulting firm chipped in to gift a basket of baby essentials. But eventually, word leaked to the press. "Isabella Carter gives birth to baby girl," read the headlines, spurring a flurry of speculation about Alistair's response. In truth, he hadn't even known she was in labor. A frantic call from Jessica Parker reached him in the midst of yet another tense investor meeting. "I just heard from a contact at the hospital. Isabella had the baby," Jessica said quietly. Alistair froze. She did? "Yes, a girl," Jessica replied. "I thought you might want to know." He ended the call, feeling a lurch in his chest. For a moment, the boardroom and the legal documents all seemed meaningless. His child, his daughter, was in the world now, and he wasn't there. He didn't even know how to reach out to Isabella, given their fraught past and the repeated warnings from Caroline. A swirl of regret tugged at him, threatening to crack the stoic mask he usually wore. That evening, after the board meeting, Alistair sat alone in his office. He found himself scrolling through social media posts about the birth. One tweet congratulated Isabella, calling her an inspiration to single mothers everywhere. Another post from a philanthropic influencer read, "A new chapter for an incredible leader. Welcome to the world, Lily Carter." His own reflection in the tinted window stared back at him, silently accusing. He wondered if he should drive to the hospital. Would she even let me see the baby? Fear paralyzed him, a new sensation that overcame his pride. He had always believed he held all the power, yet now he felt powerless. Meanwhile, Isabella was taking her first steps into motherhood, exhausted, but overflowing with love for the tiny human in her arms. She vowed to give Lily the stable, nurturing environment she deserved. As she cradled her daughter, Isabella allowed herself a single tear for Alistair. His absence was tragic, but she wouldn't let that void overshadow Lily's bright future. She told herself it was time to leave the past behind and forge on with renewed purpose. In the weeks after Lily's birth, Isabella juggled motherhood and the demands of her thriving consulting firm. True to her multitasking abilities, she led Zoom meetings with her baby dozing in a bassinet nearby, and navigated feedings while drafting strategic proposals. Caroline Johnson remained in New York to support her friend, often stepping in to soothe Lily so Isabella could focus on critical business calls. While Isabella grew into her role as a mother, Alistair's professional life deteriorated. The lawsuit drained Carter Enterprises' coffers, and investor patience wore thin. The day the judge ruled that Carter's use of specific AI algorithms violated existing patents, the company's stock plummeted. Mass layoffs loomed as a last-ditch cost-cutting measure, tarnishing Alistair's already waning reputation. Overwhelmed and desperate, Alistair considered reaching out to Isabella, not for financial gain, but because he needed solace, someone who understood him deeply. Yet every time he picked up his phone to call, pride stopped him. He blamed himself for how they parted, but the idea of facing her scorn and possibly begging for forgiveness was too daunting. So he remained silent, hollow and lonely in his penthouse. Fate, however, had plans to bring them face to face. At a charity gala hosted by the Jacobs Family Foundation, Isabella was the keynote speaker. The event aimed to raise funds for global early childhood education, a cause close to her heart now that she was a mother. She donned a sleek, modest black gown and, with Caroline's help, left Lily in the care of a trusted nanny for the evening. Alistair received an invitation through a mutual acquaintance, though no one expected him to attend. Still, driven by curiosity and an odd hope to see Isabella, he decided to go, if only to congratulate her quietly if he could summon the courage. The gala's setting was grand, a historic ballroom with crystal chandeliers reflecting off gilded walls. Celebrities, philanthropists, and CEOs mingled over champagne. Isabella, glowing with poise, mingled confidently, discussing her vision for early childhood programs that combined literacy, nutrition, and parental support. Then, as though guided by an invisible hand, the crowd parted momentarily. Alistair and Isabella found themselves face to face across the gilded room. Silence seemed to descend, muting the gala's hum. Isabella's expression flickered a mixture of shock, hurt, and something else he couldn't decipher. For a moment, neither moved. Tentatively, Alistair approached. He noticed how radiant she looked, a renewed strength in her posture. His gaze dropped to her left hand, no ring. He forced his eyes back up to meet hers. "Hello, Isabella," he said softly, his usual confident tone replaced by uncertainty. "Alistair," she replied, her voice calm but tinged with guardedness. She took in his disheveled hair, the dark circles under his eyes. If she felt pity, she hid it well. "I didn't expect to see you here," he swallowed, searching for the right words. Apologies, explanations, and regrets tangled in his throat. I heard about your work, your success. Congratulations." She nodded politely. "Thank you. It's been quite a journey." A long pause hung in the air. Finally, Isabella glanced around, conscious of the other guests watching them. "Why don't we step outside for a moment?" she suggested. Out on a terrace, overlooking a starlit cityscape, Alistair mustered the courage to speak first. I want to say I'm sorry for everything, for not being there for you, for Lily. I've made a lot of mistakes." The sincerity in his eyes was undeniable, and for the first time, Isabella sensed the vulnerability he had concealed under layers of arrogance. She took a moment, resting a hand on the terrace railing. "I spent many nights replaying how things fell apart, Alistair. I wondered if we could have saved our marriage, if we'd communicated better. But what's done is done." He exhaled a shaky breath. "I know. I'm not here to make excuses. I just want you to know that I'm proud of you, and I regret that I wasn't part of it." Silence reigned again, filled with unspoken pain. Isabella let her gaze drift to the Manhattan skyline. Eventually she turned back to him, her voice quiet yet firm. "I appreciate your honesty, but my priority now is Lily. I want her to be healthy and happy, away from toxic environments. If you ever want to be part of her life, you need to show me you've changed." Alistair's eyes flickered with the possibility of redemption. He nodded slowly. "I understand. Maybe we can arrange a meeting soon, so I can at least see her." Isabella inhaled, carefully weighing her response. "We'll see," she said, not making any promises. With that, she turned to go back inside. Halfway to the door, she paused, turning around slightly. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Alistair." He stood there alone on the terrace, the echoes of her words lingering. In that moment, he understood that forging a relationship with Lily and possibly reconciling at least as co-parents with Isabella, would require something he had never truly embraced: humility and genuine change. Following the gala encounter, Alistair attempted to piece his life back together. Though Carter Enterprises continued to struggle, he took steps to stabilize the company, selling off assets to pay for the legal settlement. The humiliating losses forced him to step down as CEO under the board's pressure, leaving him with a fraction of the control he once wielded. Despite it all, he found an odd sense of relief shedding the relentless demands of the empire he had built. In his downtime, Alistair wrote Isabella a heartfelt letter, acknowledging the pain he caused and expressing a deep desire to be involved in Lily's life. He didn't beg for forgiveness, but he humbly asked for a chance to prove he could be a caring father. Isabella read the letter multiple times, torn between the memory of his callousness and her belief in second chances. After careful thought and long discussions with Caroline, she agreed to let him see Lily. They met in a neutral setting, a cozy cafe with pastel walls and scattered potted plants. Isabella carried Lily, now 2 months old, bundled in a soft pink blanket. Alistair, visibly nervous, approached them. When he saw Lily's tiny face, he could hardly speak. Tears pooled in his eyes as he gently took her into his arms. The baby looked up at him, her expression one of innocent curiosity. Time seemed to slow. "She's beautiful," Alistair whispered, voice trembling with awe. Isabella nodded, heart constricting at the sight of father and daughter together. She couldn't deny the surge of emotion, both sadness for what had been lost and hope for what could be rebuilt, at least for Lily's sake. Their conversation was polite, focused on Lily's feeding schedule, sleeping habits, and her first coos and babbles. The tension that once defined their relationship had softened into a cautious civility. In the weeks that followed, Alistair made consistent efforts to show up. He took Lily for strolls in the park, always with Isabella or Caroline present, and slowly built a bond with his daughter. These moments, though precious, were bittersweet for Isabella, reminding her of the family unit they might have formed had things gone differently. Yet, her main concern was Lily's welfare, and seeing Alistair commit to fatherhood, albeit belatedly, reassured her. Meanwhile, Isabella's consulting firm continued its meteoric rise. International contracts flowed in, and she traveled occasionally for site visits, taking Lily along when possible. Magazine covers lauded her as a philanthropic powerhouse, featuring interviews about her vision for transforming how charities operate. She was even invited to speak at the United Nations on issues of women's empowerment and child development. During one such trip to Geneva, Isabella stood before a panel of dignitaries, passionately presenting a sustainable model for equipping local women entrepreneurs with microloans. As she concluded, the audience erupted in applause. Backstage, David Brown smiled broadly, congratulating her. "From the moment I saw you in that Bronx fundraiser, I knew you were destined for extraordinary things. The world needs more leaders like you." Isabella felt a swell of gratitude. She had come a long way from the uncertain, pregnant wife kicked out of a penthouse. Now she stood on the world stage, forging alliances that would shape communities across continents. And all the while, she remained grounded by her new role as Lily's mother, her greatest blessing. Alistair, for his part, watched from afar, astounded by her global prominence. Though he was no longer the public face of an empire, he'd begun investing his personal funds more cautiously in smaller, socially responsible ventures, a decision that ironically mirrored Isabella's philanthropic sensibilities. If nothing else, fatherhood had made him rethink his priorities. He vowed never to repeat the mistake of placing ambition above the people he cared about. As Lily approached her 6-month milestone, Isabella arranged a small celebration at her Queen's studio, inviting close friends including Caroline and David Brown, and giving Alistair the option to attend. He arrived with a thoughtful gift, a small silver locket inscribed with Lily's initials. Though the party was humble, it was filled with genuine warmth and love, a stark contrast to the cold glitz of Alistair's former galas. Looking around the room, Isabella realized she had something far more precious than unlimited wealth or a sprawling mansion. She had found autonomy, purpose, and meaningful connections. And in that moment she truly understood the depth of her journey. A millionaire had cast her aside, never realizing she was destined to become wealthier in spirit, influence, and eventually even in finances than he could ever fathom. As the seasons turned, Isabella's influence in philanthropic circles only grew. Financially, her firm's annual revenue surpassed any figure she had once imagined, making her independently wealthier, in fact, than Alistair had been when he was riding the crest of his AI acquisition. Reports surfaced that her net worth, between business ventures and philanthropic partnerships, now outstripped Alistair's dwindling fortune. Still, money was no longer the focal point of her life. Her true passion lay in transforming communities, one project at a time. With Caroline's help, she expanded her reach to international crises funding initiatives for clean water, child immunizations, and educational scholarships in remote areas. Each success further cemented her legacy. Alistair's journey, while humbler, found a semblance of redemption. He quietly rebuilt parts of his portfolio by investing in ethical startups focused on green technology and educational software. Although far from the flamboyant deals of his past, these measured moves demonstrated his newfound commitment to creating meaningful impact rather than just stacking profit. Over time, he earned modest respect among peers who noticed his transformation, but the brightest light in Alistair's life was Lily. As she learned to crawl, babble, and eventually take her first shaky steps, he was there sometimes in the background, sometimes right beside her, with Isabella's cautious blessing. They'd never be a traditional family again, but they navigated co-parenting with a sense of mutual respect. Gone was the bitterness that once poisoned their interactions. One evening, when Lily was just over a year old, Alistair visited Isabella's studio. The two spoke quietly in the living room as Lily napped in a small crib. Through the open window, city lights twinkled, a gentle reminder of the world that had once seemed so unkind. "I wanted to thank you for letting me be part of Lily's life," Alistair said, eyes earnest. Isabella offered a small smile. "She deserves both parents, and you've shown you want to be there for her." He nodded, glancing at the collage of philanthropic accomplishments taped on the wall. Photos of Isabella at various global summits, children smiling in remote villages, success stories from her projects. "I'm proud of you, Izzy. In a strange way, all of this, it needed to happen. For both of us." She tilted her head, acknowledging the truth in his words. "Life rarely unfolds how we expect. But I've learned that what seems like tragedy can be the start of something amazing." Standing, Alistair headed for the door, pausing to look back. "If you need anything at all, just call." "I mean it." Isabella nodded, then gently closed the door behind him, a swirl of relief and acceptance in her heart. She looked over at Lily, asleep in the soft glow of a nightlight, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. For Isabella, this was the real wealth, love, growth, and purpose. Alistair may have once been the millionaire who abandoned her, but she emerged from the ordeal richer in every sense of the word. And so, with Lily's soft cooing in the background, Isabella gazed at the city lights, reflecting on how far she had come. The future stretched before her, brimming with possibility. There were many communities yet to empower, countless children still needing help, and perhaps one day, love would find its way back into her life in another form. But for now, she felt complete, standing tall as a testament to resilience, ready to shape a world her daughter could be proud of. Isabella Carter's story reminds us all that resilience can flourish even in the darkest storms, leading to triumphs we never imagined possible. What began as heartbreak and betrayal evolved into a grand tale of independence and transformation. From a kicked-out wife with an uncertain future, Isabella soared to become a global philanthropist whose impact reached far beyond her original dreams. Alistair, too, found redemption in fatherhood and a renewed sense of purpose, recognizing that real success isn't measured solely by net worth, but by the lives we touch. If this powerful journey inspired you, don't forget to like this video and share it with those who need a reminder that hope and determination can lead to greatness. And of course, subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate resilience, courage, and the unbreakable human spirit. Together, we'll continue to explore the incredible potential each of us holds.